Hi, everybody. Welcome to ZealZaddy. I'm Scott. My pronouns are he, him, and this is Story Talk, where every picture tells a story. Tonight, we're going to be talking about arcs. That would be the job of any game master is complex, and the many skills needed to be good at running a game they can be myriad. There's so many, but the most important one is possibly engaging the characters in the story. You know, they're going to create the story with you, but you need to have something to start building from, unless you're going to run a completely sandboxed open world and wing it from week to week, which that can be fun. Although I think that works best for shorter form games, one shots, mini campaigns, what have you. But tonight is about planning. This is for DMs and GMs that want to get better at planning out how to make their games exciting and interesting for the long haul. So the first thing I want to answer is what is an arc? So think of it as major story points across a season of a show, often like a story with an introduction, challenge to overcome in the middle, and some kind of resolution. Whether satisfying or not is up to your DMing skills, of course. Each arc has recurring themes and conflicts and have points of connection to the main plots, and should offer opportunities for the party to learn, emote, and grow. A character arc is similarly story points, but specific to a character, often pulled from their backstory and intertwined into the main campaign arcs. So, that said, if you have questions, drop them in chat. I would love it if you put questions in all caps so it's easy to find, since I'm doing all the searching for this stuff as I go on my own. Let's move on. Let's get everybody in here because it is an exciting group and I can't wait for you to meet them all. All right. So our amazing guests tonight are all here and ready for you. Why don't we go around and let all of them say hi and say a little about themselves. I think I'm going to go top row, start with Syrup and go around clockwise. So why don't we go there?
The pressure. Okay. Hi, everybody. I am Syrup of Waffles Maple Syrup. I am one half of the duo. I usually GM Pathfinder on our Waffles Maple Syrup Twitch channel. We produce that into podcast, and you can find all the VODs on our YouTube channel. The biggest thing I will push is to just go to that youtube.com/Waffles Maple Syrup and subscribe for free if you want to support us. And that's it for me. Oh, and my pronouns are she, they.
All right. Jeph.
Hi, I'm Jeph, the GM of the Big Campaign Podcast. You can find us on anywhere podcasts are, YouTube. My pronouns are he, him. The game we play is Pathfinder 1st Edition, though heavily homebrewed and modified to accommodate a more modern world, as opposed to a more swords and sorcery setting.
Very cool. John.
Hi, my name is John. I run Double Crit Fail over on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. I run a Pathfinder 2e game that we stream. I run 10 Candles on occasion. Lately, I've been doing some live stream beta testing of a AI DM, which has been interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. My pronouns are he, him, and thank you.
Sophia. Your mic's off. You're muted.
Every time. Hi.
Me too.
I'm Sophia. My pronouns are she, her. I am a GM who I tend to run a multitudes of games. I don't a lot of times run games more than once, not for lack of trying or wanting to, but the multitudes of games out there that I would like to run, it makes it hard to go back to other games when you want to also be able to run the other ones. I am a cabinet member for Nerds with Dice, which is a channel that I started, and I'm working on expanding, and we got some exciting stuff coming later this year. And I am also an award-winning GM with Girls Run These Worlds, where I ran a game called Dark Rights and Other Forms of Exploitation, which is a Deviant, Deviant the Renegades. That's the game, and you can check that out on YouTube.
Awesome. And Julian.
Hey, that's me. I'm Julian. During the day, I'm mostly known as the nerdy wellness communicator and coach. I am also the creator and GM of Mission Quest, an exercise-infused TTRPG that I hand-built from the ground up that I'm really proud of. That's my main project that I run throughout the weeks and months. I also have many experiences with DM and D&D and a number of other systems. And most of my penchant from storytelling has been built through a mix of comedy, improv, and pro wrestling. So those are generally the things you'll see me referencing when we're having this conversation.
Awesome.
Super cool.
You know, there used to be a wrestling game that I used to play, and you got to pick a wrestler and go through a whole season. I hated wrestling, didn't know anything about it, and it was the most fun I think I've ever had in like a short, just stupid game. Oh my God.
Yep.
Getting to play a wrestler, you can say or do anything as long as it's outrageous. It's the opposite of everything else you've ever played. It was amazing.
Exactly.
I had such a blast. So if you have questions, you want to drop them in chat, please put questions before it to make it easy for me to find. But I have a bunch of questions, so I'm going to get started because I would love to hear what everyone here has to say about all this stuff. All right, so here's my first question, and it's such an easy question, and it's so hard. Bend characters to the plot, bend plot to the characters, or a little of both? And anybody can start.
Yes. That's a yes is the answer to that. All of it. Like
A little bit of both for sure, right?
I do think. Sorry.
If you have examples, I'd love to hear an example too of how you've done.
Well,
both.
I think a lot of like the world building tends to come as like a backdrop that maybe as a GM you flesh out and like present to the rest of the players, which are also part of the story development. But then like the key elements of like what do the characters want comes from the characters themselves, and making sure that that lines up with where they're going and why they're doing things produces the most satisfying stories.
I would also
in my
say,
opinion.
I think I want a general disclaimer. Anything I say is my opinion.
Yes.
It should have.
I think there's a slight dependency on the type of game that you're running. If you are running a pre-written adventure path, then pending your comfort level with flexing the adventure path itself, you may want to put a little bit more focus ahead of the campaign and work with your players to make sure that you are kind of lining that up for the smoothest experience. But if it's fully homebrew, then I would say a little bit of both. But my favorite thing is to, ahead of, any campaign or any, be it adventure path or homebrew, is to have a little sheet that I send to all the players. And I give credit to Waffles for originally pulling it and making it. And it gives me, like, there's a couple questions on there, and the questions are not just who your character is, but a question that in answering it, you already integrate yourself into the plot, and some NPCs that are important to you that you can make them up, and then I can take them, and then it's a lot easier for me to play those puppet strings and pull you into wherever I need to pull you into, because I have all the ammo I need ready for me.
I love it.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Syrup just said. If you're running a pre-written adventure, it's a lot harder to bend that plot to characters, your player characters' actions. So make sure if you're running a pre-written adventure, you have a strong session 0 where players can know like what is the tone of this adventure, maybe like what are some pre-existing hooks that would fit a character into the plot. Because I've been a player, and what I hate is when I feel like, well, why is my character here? Why is my character doing this thing? And that was just poor planning on my part, or maybe like a bad session 0 or whatever. Whereas if I am running either like a open world campaign, like kind of an Eberron situation, or making something homebrew, I always strive to make the players their backstory is the focus of all of the adventures. So in that sense, a backstory is very important, and I let them pretty much have free reign for what they want to do and how they envision their character. I do ask them to insert strong possible plot hooks and also develop NPCs and develop locations. I kind of cheat because I have my players create the world building for me, because the stronger of a backstory they have, the more I can tie it into whatever world I'm doing and go from there.
I challenge your use of cheating, by the way, because I think that's perfectly in line with what GMs are supposed to do.
Yep.
GMs do a lot of cheating that the players have no idea about.
The best GMs are masters of the flex.
Yep.
That's it.
So to continue on the system, or whether or not you're running a pre-made adventure, some games are much more aligned with bending the story to the players rather than the other way around. A lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games are very much that. Thirsty Sword Lesbians has stuff where the characters, when they come to a new place, like if you're running a sci-fi adventure, they come to a new planet, they can decide, oh, I've been here before, and then they make the world, and you insert that into your story. So some games are a little more towards bending. I am definitely a person who is a little bit of both. I think that's for me the best way to do it. I always like to tell players too that I don't worry about what I need. If I need something, it's going to find its way into your path. If I wanted something to happen on the beach, that's not necessarily a problem if you want to go to the cafeteria, because said thing can happen in the cafeteria. I will place the things where your characters want to be them.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, I would say that I think for the most part, like everyone else here, both is always best. I benefit very much from having a lot of really great players I've known for a very long time. So we're all a little bit more used to open world concept of players write backstories. They're welcome to invent NPCs, cities, villages that get incorporated in the world that other players may visit. But I enjoy a lot more creating plot stuff that doesn't involve the characters and letting them react. Hopefully the idea is, since they are adventurers, they will react at some point with something. But I'm also just, I really enjoy the idea of making a world that doesn't need them to, so that wherever they get involved, that tells me where they want to go.
That makes sense. I have follow-up thoughts, or questions, actually.
Okay.
I've never GM'd a pre-written module. I would argue I've never really GM'd a module that I wrote myself. I'm heavy on the improv, but I build guidelines of like the larger points, and then each session is the chaos. But for someone that would be looking to pull more from you bought this book from a game store and want to see it from beginning to end, have any of you had experience trying to, rather than focus on the individual character backstories, kind of provide the group as a whole as like a want, rather than, I don't know if that makes any sense.
When you say group as a whole,
like
the
party.
Want, what do you mean by the want though? Like tie in the want of the whole group into the plot?
Yeah. So they have the freedom to like individually create their crazy whatever character they're making, but by coming to them as a group and saying, hey, this is what your party is looking to accomplish, this is why you're together.
Yeah. So this wasn't a pre-written adventure, but I played maybe a little over a year-long campaign in Eberron, and one of the things they have there is the idea of patrons. And so we just rolled randomly, and the patron that they got was a newspaper. So even though they all had their different things that they were doing and their own, levels of expertise in combat, their own personalities, they all worked for this newspaper. So as we began the adventures, it was all about like going and exploring the story or whatever else. So I think that's a really good point, and I'm really interested to hear about other people's opinions, because if you do have that, even if they're different and come from different places, if they have that solidifying tie of what brings them all together, I do think that helps both the characters and the plot move along together.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to me because one of my favorite things, and I have a feeling we're going to get into it a little bit later, is
Whoops.
no, this is my guess, I don't know for sure, that, you know, part of longer campaigns is weaving independent motivations from different players into,
we're definitely getting into that.
Yeah, into these arcs.
No, maybe.
Spoilers.
I would have a small concern of minimizing that if I were to go to the whole group and say, here's the one thing that all of you have necessarily for sure, but there's thousands of ways to do that that's not limiting as well. So like in Outcast and Outclass, the show that I run, which is Pathfinder 2E, and is based on the Strength of Thousands adventure path from Paizo, in a way, I think it is doing that. And I'm going to say it and let me know if this is kind of in line with that or not, from your opinion. Mm-hmm. But, you know, it starts off with magic school. You're going to a magic school. So to an extent, I went to all of the players and I was like, you all are coming to the Magambia. You are coming to this school together. And everybody knew that, like, obviously they would come at the same time. Nobody had to know each other beforehand or anything like that. But when they came to the school, they were all going to be in the same cohort, which means that they're all like basically in their own little group. Hey, surprise, surprise, that's the party. So in that extent, you know, yes, here's everybody connected together. You're stuck together because this is the plot line for you. But everybody was able to, like, why am I coming to the Magambia? How did I get here? Everybody had their own independent story when it came to that. So I'm not sure if that is considered like the whole group or if that's still independent in your eyes.
That is what I'm thinking of. I think the difference is that's still for a story that was so I'm picturing more for when it's a rigid book you bought from the game store, which I feel personally I've never done, but I feel it is much easier if you're, even if the story itself is pre-written or predestined. If it's coming from your story that you know or are developing, there's always a little more room for letting the input from the individual players pop up. Yeah. And I was wondering more specifically about, like, literally like the D&D modules. Like if you're, because those...
Yeah, like let's say you were running Descent into Avernus. You have all the players be from
Curse of Strahd.
Gate, or Curse of Strahd or whatever.
Right.
That's really, I've never done that, but that should be done now that I hear it.
Oh, okay. Cool. Awesome.
It is, like, so Strength of Thousands is an adventure path from Paizo, you know, a book pre-written and everything. It's right over here.
Cool.
But, yeah. So but I really appreciate Paizo and how they do it, because they usually, if it's adventure paths that are a bit more specific to, like, a specific setting or something like that, they give you a player's guide. Where
nice.
They do the work for you and you hand that off to the players and they say, here's backgrounds you can choose to help get you to this point. But they kind of pre-write that and include that in the adventure path to still, you know, do that for you, which is really, really convenient.
Awesome.
Yeah, that leads to a question that I had, which is, how do you balance planning versus allowing full character agency? Like, do you have tools for it? You know, what are your techniques for handling that? All of you sound like you're pretty open to a lot of character agency. So how do you balance it? Because if it's a long campaign, if you spend a lot of work in the beginning, there's a tendency to want that work to come out. Although I have a feeling everybody here has also done all that work, and by the end, none of it was used.
Oh yeah, Chaos Party rule.
So,
yes.
For me, I think what it is I often, even if it's only going to be 4 to 8 episodes or something, I put more of, rather than planning all of the details. I do the outline method kind of thing. This is, and some of those outline, will change depending on things that happen. But it's, when I start, I go, here's our villain. Here's what they want. They are somewhere on this outline. What are their goals to getting there? And then, you talk to the players, you add in things, and you get a little bit of an outline to go on. And obviously, I like the outline because the outline's a little less rigid, and I can add things and move things around. And
I completely agree. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. I particularly for longer drawn out stories that have like each time you sit down to play, you want some version of immediate payoff, but that we're like you're building towards a larger goal. I like the idea of making sure there's a world clock. So like, I don't know if that's a technical term, but basically like the things that characters are doing aren't happening in a vacuum. So regardless of what decisions they are making, things are happening around them that are, for better or worse, means they'll find a situation dealt with in one way or another based on their previous actions.
The
which
world
helps.
moves.
The world moves around them rather than being them in a fixed point. And it doesn't like I also have like friends that I know that like literally chart out like a moon cycle and like a day cycle, and like I'm not saying you have to be that intense about it. If you love doing that, do that, please, by all means. But it's more that it's embedding consequence to character actions, even if the action is an action. Like if they're choosing to avoid a conflict or chase down a random farmer because they have a beef with them for 3 episodes. The consequences down the road are that maybe they're not strong enough when they fight the thing they need to fight. Maybe the thing they get to fight has been fought by someone else, and now they have a rival group they have to battle against. Like the world itself is not almost as to the world doesn't revolve around them, basically.
I love that. Yes, my partner Waffles preaches that all of the time. So it's an answer I've heard before, and I champion. I absolutely agree. Do you mind one more time repeating the question for me, though, or could we jot that down somewhere? I'm so sorry.
Player agency versus plot adherence, and how
Thank
do
you.
you balance?
How do you balance it?
How do you
What are
balance
the
it?
two
Keep the
balances?
balance.
I wanted to add, because I agree with Sophia and Julian like so much in this. I think this is going to be a common thread to a lot of my answers with the big "it depends," because I GM for a stream, I GM for a production and for entertainment, and so I have a little bit of a more intense focus on episodic satisfaction, if you will, where I know, so the way I kind of balance that, because I never want to take away player agency, no matter the situation, no matter whether it's for stream or anything else, because it's not TTRPGs at that point. Like that's the collaborative storytelling where everybody has an influence. That is what TTRPGs are. And so I don't ever want to take away player agency. And the way that I personally balance it is to just look, whether it's for the session or for the full campaign, what am I trying to tell? What is the arc, the story, the trope? What am I trying to tell in this current moment? So where are we starting? Where are we ending? And then as long as I have that end goal pretty clear in my mind, somebody does something out of left field, okay. But I still know the end goal point, so I can just course correct and be like, okay, so we're going about it this way now. But if I spend too much time fleshing out the middle, then I'm spending more time being thrown off by player choices rather than welcoming them and just kind of getting ready to react however it ends up shaking out.
Yeah. I agree. I kind of take that same kind of approach where I might know where the beginning is and I might know where the end is, but everything that happens in the middle is very loose. and how the players want to do it is how they do it. So kind of like what Julian was talking about too. Like, I don't do so much ticking talk stuff, but you know what your villain is, and you know what their plan is, and you know what they're going to do if nothing happens. So they're just going to do that. And until your players meet that character, like, that is what your plot is. That's how your characters go from where they started to that ending you had in mind. I also don't plan too much into the future. Like, I'm sure we'll get into maybe like arc structure here later on in the conversation. But so for me, like, there's a session arc, and there's a like a mission arc that might be 2 or 3 sessions, and then there's like your campaign arc. And like, I do my most planning with what's gonna happen this next upcoming session, because I hate doing that never sees the table. Everything else, until it's said, is very nebulous and cloudy and doesn't really exist and can change based off of what characters decide. So that's kind of how I handle it. So, for example, if I'm doing something that's very player heavy focused and I'm using their backstories and I'm kind of doing these individual arcs for each individual character, I kind of think about, like, okay, here's your backstory. What is the thing that is most interesting about your backstory? Is it a problem that's going on in your hometown, or is it someone you want revenge on, or something like that? And so then I develop that individual arc based off of their backstory. I create, again, the beginning, how they enter, how they transition from where they are to the beginning of this little arc, and then I know who the villain is. But again, everything that happens in the middle, I might have ideas for what could happen, but I never try to lock anything in to where they could corner themselves into a place where they can't continue, or have a like, there's actually a really interesting question in chat about do all planned problems have a solution? Do you know them going in? I want to hear everyone else's.
Yeah, I was going to ask that as soon as this one ran down. I was going to ask that one.
Yeah, I don't have, I know what their obstacle is, but I sometimes won't have any idea how they're going to solve it.
Right. So there's the question. Do all planned problems have a solution? Like, when you create your session plans or your campaign plans, do you have ideas on solutions, or do you just say, here's the problem, it's on you, like, your problem now? To the characters.
I've found for the most part, over the many years of GMing, it is far more enjoyable and fun to create problems without solutions. Because I absolutely love seeing how creative my players can be and finding ways to get past things that, I don't know, can you?
Right.
Moments.
And they'll probably try to break it anyways.
I mean, and that's great. If they find a neat way to break it, I'm 100% in.
I think I mentioned in chat, but my favorite thing is creating scenarios where the players basically have to get out of their own way. And like it's in Mission Quest, it tends to happen a lot. But I'll basically give them like a very simple task, like, hey, there's a thing across the street you have to go pick up. And then the entire session is them failing to cross the street because they're getting in their own way. Like, the easier the problem is to solve, the more complicated they try to make the solution. And I don't know why, but it's so much fun to watch.
Yeah, there's a reason why doors are running gag and Critical Role.
Right? My party found a spot that didn't have a door, made a door, and then didn't trust it.
You can't say that when I'm drinking. Almost getting on my nose.
I mean, there's the classic. I don't know. I think it's classic. The aspect of, if your players are theorizing a solution that is better than anything you've thought of, that is now the solution. Good luck. Because if it's cooler, why the heck not? And if it's something that they've thought of themselves and is satisfying to say, oh my gosh, look at your critical thinking, like, that's perfect, yes, it works, everybody's happier. But do I have a potential solution going in? Generally I do, just for the sake of, like, I don't paint myself in a corner where, like, maybe I didn't think of something and I'm like, oh, well, my gosh, you don't have any spell slots left. I forgot about that. Like, I just kind of, like, make sure there's something that there is a way out always.
Yeah, actually, there was one thing that was mentioned in the comment a moment ago, which is riddles and things like that. I usually think of one or two, and I hope that they find their own better one, because mine are not going to be as good as theirs anyway. But at least there's some idea of a way.
I completely agree.
I think characters collectively, their level of chaotic thought is way higher than my individual power of chaotic thought. I let them be their own muse and my muse at the same time.
Riddles especially I find are fascinating because like you may have a painted picture in your head, but again, we're talking TTRPGs and unless you're talking very, very, very specific visual aids with like a depending where you're, virtual or not, someone else might have a completely different vision in their minds on what it's looking like, and then you're just kind of like, well, I'm gonna go with that then.
Yeah. All right, let me see. I have
to touch a little bit.
Sorry.
To go back to
Yep.
the character agency thing. We're DM's a player too at the table. The difference kind of being though is the world is our character, right? And so I'm a big fan of using the character agency over my plot to kind of push the world because my character will react to them. But that does mean, of course, like many of you said, making NPCs that aren't dependent upon the characters for their reactions. So that way, when they get there, they feel like they're part of it, right? When they come into the town and they see everyone voted for the bad guy intentionally, even though they were against them, it makes them consider, well, maybe this isn't the plot that they need to hook onto, but not in a bad way, right? Because now it gives them a place they can come back to. But that's, taking information from how characters react in your world, I think, is more fun than putting set goalposts that they have to reach. Kind of like the riddle thing we mentioned here.
Yeah.
Figure out the session itself is a riddle, right? And if the players themselves find a better way to get to the end of it than you did, then take that, because that is free input.
Yep, it's gold.
Does anyone have any examples of something that's happened in their session where you thought the plot was going to go this way and your players went way off on another course, and did you decide to go with it? Does anyone have any examples of that?
I think there's a pretty simple one of running a masks campaign there was just like a little starter thing in the beginning where they were going to take down some bad guys. We, of course, that goes south. The dice roll bad thing, whatever. Have to rescue the players so that we can move on to the story from the little thing, which changes obviously how the world reacts to them and how they feel about things. And I think the dice are also, part of the storytelling that we're doing, and it can go from a simple little thing like that turning into a bigger thing where the players struggle to going, up against a big boss and losing. And that's happened to me a couple of times, especially in masks where, okay, we're near end game, big villain shows up. They, things go very well for them. And then you got to retreat the big boss so that he can be there for the next 2 sessions that you still got left to do or whatever.
Always give your BBEG an escape hatch.
Yep.
For the moment when you asked that, John, I was like, oh man, of course I can't think of one. And my partner's question in chat is actually, funnily enough, the perfect answer for it as well. It was in the pre-written adventure path as well, which is always a little bit difficult because you're like, well, how off the rails do I go now? Because this wasn't what I expected. But they were level 1 and there was a big fight in the woods, and I'm trying to keep it a relatively spoiler free. And TLDR, they came back, they beat the thing, but somebody had a disease. And the characters did not, and again, this is also, the players were new to Pathfinder, new to the deadliness of a lot of these things. They had no idea, but the characters decided they were going to go back and they were going to just, try to deal with it themselves. They didn't try to get medical attention. They didn't try to use any of the resources on campus. None of these things. They were like, no, we're going back. We're watching her sleep. She'll be fine. She nat woned her save and immediately died.
Yeah, that's bringing D&D mentality to Pathfinder, which is a death sentence for any player.
Hey, it's no more. It's way less lethal than say Morkborg.
It's true. And then you have a level 1 character that we barely even got into the plot. This was a little side mission, and they're dead. What am I going to do with this? And Waffles' question was, as well. Do you let them die? Do you find an interesting way to allow them back or something else? But also, that was completely off the rails for your question, John. I can't let that go. I can't let that be unmeaningful. Mm-hmm. If you're even if it's level 1, even if it's the very, very beginning, this is a momentous thing for your character. And so I have to give it its due diligence. I say have to, but I feel it's my responsibility as a GM to give this the gravitas, even if it wasn't originally supposed to be very, very momentous. And so we kind of ended it on a cliffhanger, and we made it a huge moment. It ended up being like 2 whole sessions of some sidebar of like this whole thing with her and what we were going to do with the character and all this kind of stuff. And it was one of the best and favorite moments of the entire campaign. And a comic was made out of it. And I'm so very proud. It was really, really, really cool. So sometimes the unexpected is really the best thing that can happen.
Yeah, I was able to think of a story for you, John. This is very early on in my jamming career, as it were. My players were all epic, which means they're like level 24. We're playing D&D 3.0.
Wow.
And I was kind of getting like to that point of like, geez, I don't know quite where to take the game. We've been playing for a long time. Let's start tidying this up. So I had a sentient black hole from the Epic Handbook show up to come take out the party. So that way you can start building a new world. This is early GM stuff, right? So like, I put my flag in the sand. This is where things change. Players will never confuse me. And with, giant sentient black hole shows up. It's immune to magic. It's immune to ranged weapons. The ranger's confused. The wizard's useless. The rogue can't sneak attack it. And the wonderful fighter decides it's like, well, I'm a level 24 epic dreadnought. I think I'm just going to go tear the black hole in half. And I was like, well, that's preposterous. I mean, you can't do that, right? But, of course, being a new DM, let me go check the stats and look at all of the stuff. And there in the last sentence of the monster description is a break DC of this constructed sentient black hole, which is 58. And the player jumps on the black hole and passes the DC 42 fort save to not be disintegrated instantly and perma-die, and proceeds to tear this black hole in half like he's breaking a jawbreaker. As he rolls a 19 using all of this stuff to get like a 60-something on his break DC. As I, as DM, have to do the whole, give me a moment, give me a second, I think I have a phone call, walk outside.
Because this was the transition to the new world you were going to be introduced.
Yep. And then it was walk back and be like, you know what? That was epic. I had no idea that was going to happen. Let's just keep going. I think we played that game till level 33.
Wow.
That's
I love that.
Awesome.
I don't have one specific story about the chaos, or experiencing the chaos going completely sideways as a DM. I mean, I had the creating a door and then not trusting it, but that's like every session. I do have one as a player that I witnessed because my partner was the DM, and we were playing through Rise of Tiamat, and I think it was like session 2 of the fixed time campaign, and we decided as a party to head to a tavern. There was no tavern planned. There was no reason for us to go there. There was nothing to do there. We have accepted a mission. We're supposed to go on the mission. And the next episode, there's a tavern. We're hanging out at the tavern. We're getting with the locals. We spend the entire session almost entirely TPKing by checking all the traps and like finding the Thieves Guild that had nothing to do with the story. And then the next day, we like skipped past half the things that were from the book by just like sprinting down a road the wrong way. And it was, yeah.
I had a really funny one I think was very interesting. I was running Tales from the Loop, which is, I think, just an amazing little system. I love Tales from the Loop. And I created, like when I run it, I make them about 3 to 4 sessions so that they're fun. They're a little bit more than a one-shot, but have a lot of enough room to create some story. Well, I did one called Little Hearts. That was the name of it, which was, when I named them, I always named them from lines of 80s songs. So that was a Pat Benatar song, that Little Hearts Like the One in Me. So I named them the session from songs. And it was about a robot that wanted to go to, it had seen pictures of prom and wanted to go to a prom. And it was treated as a robot, but it really wanted to go to a prom. So it was stealing dresses and trying to like turn into a person. And, the idea was, what I thought was going to happen, I was say the idea was, it was going to go to the prom, and like every 80s movie, the kids would have fun with it, and the adults would be terrible and try and capture it. And what was mind-blowing and beautiful was one of the characters decided, I love this robot. We're going to be in a relationship. And it totally changed the dynamics of the game for the rest of the thing. It was like a real prom date and all this, so unexpected and wonderful and fun and goofy and all the stuff that you expect from an 80s sci-fi show. Beautiful.
That's amazing.
All right. Let me ask. Okay, so every TV series and movie, every good one, they have an A plot, they have a B plot. And if they're really complicated, they might have a C plot, plus individual character arcs. And those are very accepted narrative structures for the art form of film and TV. I'm not sure that it's that different, the way that structures are always done in TTRPGs. But I'd like to know, do you follow a structure like that, or do you have your own structure that you've created? Or do you go with more of an amorphous kind of structure, more of a, I remember, John, you were saying something about them being more blurry. And I kind of agree. I think the closer in time it is, the tighter the structure. But that's just me. I don't know. So how do you build your structures?
Oh, man. Do I nerd out about this? Because my storytelling, like the biggest reason I haven't run pre-written modules is because the things I run come from a kernel of a story that I have for an idea, and the medium it fits best in is in playing it with a group of friends rather than writing it down or like what have you. But because of that, I still structure it with the same 3-act structure that I would a book or a story or what have you. Like I view one-shots as short stories, which means you start in the second act. The first and third act are established, and you're just like in this point in time. But I consider like, what type of story am I telling? What type of like, even not so much in the just for the grand campaign where we have those epic arcs, but like from session to session. Is this a monster in a house? Is this more of a slapstick session? What are the emotional beats that I'm looking for in this story? And I start from those same kernels as if I was writing it for a book or a fully written story, and I just plot out those beats or those emotions, and that I know I need to hit. And then I present that in the world that the characters end up trying to interact with. I don't know if that makes sense, but yes. The answer to the question, yes.
I'm very, very lucky to have very talented players. And let me tell you why that's relevant. Because I think that when it comes to TTRPGs, as I've said before, with collaborative storytelling, everyone is involved with these storylines. Everyone is responsible for moving A plots and B plots along, even C plots. Yeah. And when you have a wonderful table where you can trust your players and you know that, oh my gosh, y'all, at some point, GM a table of all GMs, it is so beautiful. But when you have, that type of trust and that reliance, I think that's the best way to realize that, because it's not a TV show. It's not pre-written. There is no way to ensure that this threads in over here at this point. Oh, perfect. And now this, you can't. We just talked about how things derail all of the time. So I focus on my A plot, and I keep in the back of my head, and I keep my little notes on potential B plots or C plots that are happening. And half the time, the player is the one that serves up a callback to something else that's the perfect lead up into a B plot. And when you have that reliance on knowing how the classic structure works, where people know this isn't the main plot, but we're going to pursue this thread for the current moment, for the current session, then you have what ends up when you look back at the end of your campaign as, holy crap, this would make a great TV show, because you end up following that same structure. But I don't plan for those B plots and C plots as much as I just keep my eye out for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, like, I've read a few books on, like, classical story structure,
Yep.
Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, inciting incident,
Yep.
big gloom.
Back to AP Lit.
Yeah!
And I feel like tabletop games are so different that I would personally have a really hard time trying to, in my mind, it would almost be like trying to shoehorn in like a 3-act structure into a game. So typically, like, instead of thinking about like plot points, I just think of it as a series of obstacles, be it like combat or a riddle or a physical thing that they have to overcome. And then the plot is emergent from how the characters decide to overcome those things, and just the fun moments they have with each other along the way. So that's how I handle it. I don't. My answer is no.
So you have an amorphous structure.
Yes.
With a few ideas floating around in a cloud.
Yes.
Nice.
But like maybe we can talk about this a little bit later, but I've never actually run like a long form campaign for streaming. I've only done it for home games. So my question is, if your intention is to entertain an audience, how do you have to look at that differently?
Because I want to, I guess it depends on the story and what I'm doing. I will usually, if I do add a B plot or something, it is, say, one B plot, and I'm thinking about what I find entertaining and stuff. Otherwise, it's starts at session 0 with players, and then I'm working with the players to see what they want as B plots, or things they say about their characters in session 0 that, how can this tie into the campaign as a potential B plot or C plot? Otherwise, I'm thinking about my, plot A, as Syrup said, and seeing where it's going, because of the collaborative nature on it. Even in a streaming platform, you're going to, I think, find the most interesting thing for both the players and the audience come from what the players are doing in terms of B plots, because the B plots are, I think, about them specifically, whereas the A plot is what you want as the GM.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
Yeah, I do something very similar. I do create an A plot, which often doesn't go very much more than the inciting incident. But there is a plot that I imagine is going to, as like a spine I can build off. And then I dig into the, like, I love a lot of backstory. So I will dig into the backstory and I will find ways to feed that backstory in ways that create subplots through the whole campaign. In fact, I get backstory in the campaign I'm running now. We're nearing the end of it. It's been running for 2 years right now, and it's all streamed. And when we started, there was backstory that is just now starting to come forward, because I think the most valuable thing that you can get from your players outside of their actual characterization is their storytelling compliments, like them complimenting your story. I don't want to say your story because it's not my story. I'm just creating an outline and they're building everything else around it. But I dig that stuff and pull it in everywhere, and I make them, all the big bad stuff happens around their backstory by the end of it. Well, not all of it, most of it, but a lot of it. And it really feels very personal by the time they get to it. So, and it is, because it is personal, it's them. And I think that creates investment in the game that is more valuable than anything I could have written down as a plot.
Yeah.
So
the to your question of the whether when it's the stream for an audience versus or on the table, I'm slightly biased because I would build this for my table anyways. But I think there is a little bit of filling in the gap in translation for the audience that's not around the table. And the way I like to look at it is traditionally, and I could be wrong, but traditionally what I was taught or learned or heard from other people for DMing was trying to get certain aspects of gameplay into each session, right? You have your exploring, maybe some travels, maybe some combat. Generally, this is more of a formula for like a one shot. You want to make sure everyone gets to play a certain thing. Shopping episodes are a different thing, but instead of focusing on those specific types of play beats, I focus on the overcoming of something or coming to a critical conclusion. And that is the point at which I decide this is where the episode ends. Whether they succeeded or failed, it leaves a cliffhanger. It leaves you wanting more for the next thing. What are they going to do? It creates the symbol crash that you would normally get for like the end of an episode, without necessarily the specific plot having to be there. But it's timing it based on the emotional beat of either failing or succeeding, the most specific nuanced problem that happened today in this episode, rather than making sure every element of gameplay got hit. But that's generally how that's what I would say.
nice.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I have more questions, but I do want us to take a quick break. So we're going to take 10 minutes, and while we're running during the intermission, please check out the Kickstarters and crowdfund projects that are going to be shown. I'll drop links in. I have to apologize. I didn't connect the right video, so I have to connect it really quick. So you're going to see the bad functions of Streamlabs for a moment while I do it. So
No worries.
enjoy, everybody. We will see you in 10. And we are back. Welcome back, everybody. All our windows are in the same places. Thank goodness. I was afraid I was going to have to move them around and shuffle them while we were live. Oh, what an annoyance that would be. I do want to get to the question that Waffles had dropped in, but I'm going to modify it. So let me go back to that question. I think there was some meat in the question. It felt a little specific. So
let us in on the inside joke first. Let's.
Well, Sarah was talking about a character dying and early, So I'm gonna twist it a little bit, but I'm gonna bring it back into it as part of it. Does the world continue unabated by the characters, or do you revolve the actions of their environment around them? In the case of that one, a character death, does that change what the world around them is doing?
That's
It
I mean,
changes...
based on what we said earlier.
I feel like it changes something. I don't know what necessarily, but I think it has to change something, or player death becomes meaningless.
Yes.
Character death, not player death. I'm so sorry.
But what about
Character.
what about other impactful actions by your characters? Maybe do their other actions affect the world, the bigger world around them, including potentially even your story arc, or does the story arc continue unabated with the death of a character being a minor inconvenience along the way?
so. Yeah, I guess it really depends on the goal of the campaign you have in mind. Kind of meant a little bit to touch on like the last question of like it really depends on how you perceive your game. I think as a GM, like last campaign I ran, if I had to summarize it very succinctly, would be what if Supernatural and Evangelion were combined.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I had another game where it was very character focused, and they had big bads they were supposed to take care of, and one of the players did die before accomplishing those goals. It was not as big a part of that game directly, because that player died away from all the other PCs, but it has affected campaigns that came after that. As that story spread in the current campaigns, there's like a holiday week dedicated to that character for being a saint that died. I don't think every death has to be extremely meaningful for the plot, but I think it should always fit in with the story, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. I think it... Even... Because, I mean, if it happens really early on in the story, the greater evil or good or whatever still exists and gets to be dealt with. But I think it, on an individual level, in those next couple of beats, it pays big dividends into how the player characters interact with the world. So yeah, it's both.
Yeah, so for me, both as a player and as a GM, like I don't want any character to have plot armor, and I'm not going to let them live just because I want to do something cool with them. Like this is now their cool moment is that they die.
Yeah.
I'm actually as a player in a Star Wars campaign, and we were all the premise of the campaign is that we're all younglings being trained right before Order 66. And so, like, we're all in the age range. We started out maybe around 13 years old. And my character, as a player, my character actually died and pretty much changed the whole trajectory of where the GM was going to go with this campaign. Like, still the same setting and all that stuff. But the things that he had planned to do in the course of the plot, he had to shift that because a youngling Jedi character passed away, and that was going to affect like the Jedi Order. So I feel like no character should have plot armor, but their death should have impact on the story for sure.
I will just disclaimer, session 0 and player agreement as well is a critical factor in that. Because I do know people who don't want to have their character, if that they work in a way where, you know, they put so much love into their character that they don't want to ever have to say goodbye to that. I personally am not in that camp, but I think that it's very valid. And I think that as long as you have your session zeros and you know what kind of game you're playing, that is completely valid to what you're saying, John. And then like in a campaign where everybody agrees that like they're okay with their character deaths and things like that, as long as it has weight, as long as it has impact and it doesn't feel like well, I guess all of that work was for nothing kind of a deal, then then absolutely. Then I love that when there's not plot armor in that regard.
Yeah, I do agree. It is very, very important to let the players know up front that death is an option and what that means within the consequences of the world or the story you're telling. I very specifically in Mission Quest, there is no such thing as death for the players, because the players are also the characters, which means if the characters die, the players die, and that's really bad for both morale and insurance. Yep.
Bad for morale. That's the
yeah, and insurance, but also, that doesn't mean they're void of consequence of choices or actions, right? Like they still physically have care. The consequences are they impeded from succeeding in their mission or their goal, or are they getting closer to succeeding? And feeling that weight of that dichotomy still exists, even though technically the characters and thankfully them will not actually die.
Kind of a similar vein to the do you let characters die? Do you let the party fail? Like if they're fighting the like
that's a great follow up to that question.
Yeah, like let's say that they're fighting the big bad guy of your campaign, and the whole thing is building up to this, and they're ruling really poorly, and you could tell that you're gonna TPK. Do you let that happen? Do you shift it? Do you try to make it meaning? Like, how do you handle that, guys and girls?
Because if the party's successful, it's an epic. If the party fails, it's a tragedy. It's still a desirable story either way.
Failing forward is my answer to that. You have to fail forward. So yes, you can fail, but if they are exactly where they started, then that's no fun for anybody.
Very true.
So as long as you fail forward, I think that you feel that you're not just being yes to everything. You feel there's depth and agency, and you feel like the world is still reacting to you. You don't have that plot armor, but you have to still have that situation change. So like you fail the lock picking or something like that, which is something minor compared to like you lose against the BBEG, but it's not just like, okay, now what do you do? Like maybe, something else happens, or because you failed, somebody heard you and now the situation is different than it was before, and things like that. So as long as things are continuously moving in, then I'm all for it.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with the idea that failing forward is the best for almost every game, right? Like nothing is more annoying than playing a video game, right? You didn't talk to that correct NPC, so you literally can't play the game. So I'm a huge fan of like story reasons fail forward, but I really love sometimes plot absolute failures. I had a great one which players had a choice between stop the BBEG or stop the sphere of destruction that they were casting towards the world tree which bound the planes together. They stopped the BBG, totally nailed it. The world tree's gone, which basically ended that campaign. The next game they played, the world has way worse magic because there's no ley lines connecting anything.
I use ley lines. How cool.
Yeah, like I'm having a blast with it. But it was fun because they really enjoyed the next world being built off that failure.
Mm-hmm.
That story in that world was a lot more invested because the problems with it were something that they were involved in. So I think failure is a really important plot tool, but not necessarily a story tool. If that fits.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, this is a kind of breaks away from the conversation we've been having, although it's still built around it. When I'm imagining a campaign, often I just write a few sentences to try and get an idea, like almost like an elevator pitch to myself about a campaign concept. And it will sometimes create the beginnings of a narrative focus in my head. So when you're thinking of what you're going to run next, what are your tools for creating that initial spark for what you're going to build, and what does it lead to generally? How does it lead out to you building a structure?
For me, it's usually a premise. It's like a strong, what would happen if blank? So, or it'll be something like, I really want to run a horror-themed Christmas adventure. So once I have the kernel of an idea of what would be a cool thing to do, what would be a cool premise, I begin thinking about how to develop it from that point. And that it's iterative. You write down ideas, and then you brainstorm so much, and then you kind of go back and reread what you wrote, and then you completely scratch it out and write down new things. And it's an iterative process until you have something that works well for what you're trying to accomplish.
Cool.
Yeah, in my own home games, not my podcast or one shots. We've been playing for 22 years now. Every campaign is built upon the ruins and bones of the last one, and so that's kind of the pitch. The elevator pitch you write to yourself is, what did they do last time, and how does that affect it? And I really enjoy being able to build that way, because I feel like you get a lot of history, you get a lot of living world kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you get to see, number one, players see their own legacies refracted and distorted through history to build those campaign ideas. They get them into really weird places, right? When a character is playing the great-great-great-granddaughter of another character in a different world that was affected because of that. I feel like it adds a lot on the player backstory side and how those worlds come together to make the arcs that you need to tie them all in.
Yeah,
that's awesome. I've two I've two separate answers because this depends. If it's generally for a home game, or I guess a traditionally styled game that I'm playing with friends, the reason the game is happening is because I've already had a kernel of something in my head that I want to build around. It can be a stupid joke. It can be a specific feeling I want to have around the table, and then I'm just building ways to create that feeling. It can be just a kernel of something that I can't let go of, and then I just work backwards from there to make everything kind of fit that one little nugget that I'm trying to build. I have a one shot that I run with either people I've never played with before, or people are trying to learn D&D. And it's the same one shot every time, but the goal of the one shot is to get people used to talking to each other in character. So there's the ability to fight things, but it's focused on them running around the world, this fixed area of time, trying to solve a mystery, trying to figure out why they got where they are, trying to breaking not what's the opposite of breaking the fourth wall? If you're referring to your character in stats and numbers rather than as talking as a character. What?
No, not quite metagaming. Because it's
going the other way. It's switching from...
It's just immersion, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, because a lot of the time when someone plays for the first time, they're staring at their character sheet trying to make sense of how the rules work. And I'd focus most of the time on having people look up from the character sheet and just say whatever comes to their mind. And getting that transition to hit is the focus of that game. So it's built with very little NPCs, and just the eerie... You're basically shanghaied and stuck on a ship, and you don't know why. And there was a ghost murder on board. Then you're about to fall into... We realize you're about to fall into the Royal Harbor. So you have to solve the mystery, get off the ship, and not get like accused of the murders in the first place, all in the span of this fixed period of time because there's a clock running, and all of it is just them talking to each other. That's the entire game. So it does, but that was built on the specific premise of what do I want the characters to do, or why is this game happening, basically. Specifically for Mission Quest games, the games are it's run as procedurals, kind of like a cop show, where like if you were to overlay every episode, the special effects hit at the same commercial break at the same time every single time. But in between that, you have individual cases that are happening. And those cases are very paint by numbers and very simple, and they're broad, so that the players have more agency to run amok and cause chaos. And it's literally what world are they in, and what artifact or item or thing are they searching for, and then how those two things chaotically interact with them messing it up for sure. That is basically all it is.
Yeah.
What?
For me, I feel like it really depends. Like if you are inspired by media or something like that, and you have a thought, then and you take it and you roll with it, that is like a wonderful way to do that. But sometimes it's a bit more need over inspiration. So if like I know that I have a game that I need to, make and figure something out, or even a one shot or something like that, how do I do that? Because I don't have time to like casually watch a lot of TV and a lot of things, be like, oh, here's an interesting thread that I can play with. And for that, I think the question that I kind of focus on is, what is the problem that I'm trying to solve? Kind of to what you said, Julian, as well. I'll say, like, let's say for a stream show or something like that, you're looking for something modular that is like inviting for guests. So I'll start thinking about, what kind of aspect of it is what is something that story based makes sense to introduce and let go of guests in a way. Like, how can I tie that into the story? That's a problem that I'm trying to solve, and that might inspire something. Or on the other hand, to use my partner, for example, when Pathfinder first came out, it was a brand new campaign. The quote unquote problem we were trying to solve is, how do we get familiar with a new system that we want to try out? And the answer to that was a really, really cool concept that he created, which was the world has already ended, and we've been chosen to go basically back in time to try to stop it from ending. What does that have to do with learning Pathfinder? Every time we sort of downloaded a little Matrix style, right, back into the past, we could pick, we have a player character in the future, but we could also pick, when every time we go back, a different class or a different ancestry to play. And that was just as a solution to figure out, hey, you want to try different classes, you want to try out different mechanics, here's a really in-game way to do so.
Very
and
cool.
So, yeah, it was really, really cool. So, yeah, I just try to think of, like, what is the problem that I'm looking to solve?
Yeah, I think that's always a good place to start. Even if you're working from an I'm inspired spot. I like to run games. I haven't yet run one in the Power Ranger system, but I like to run ones that are inspired by Power Rangers. Mm-hmm. But after that point, I still have to come up with the rest of the thing. So now, what's the problem? Who's the villain here? What are Power Rangers has often has lots of other themes going on, from players to whatever. Wild Force has a lot of environmental themes. So what are the themes of that, and what are those problems that we're trying to solve, is a great place to expand on your initial premise of any kind.
Also, asking the players what they want is great.
Yeah, I mean, you should be doing that a lot anyway.
Only as a last resort.
So when you're creating your plans, you put in place whatever you're going to do throughout a campaign, how frequently do you go back and reassess where you are within your campaign or your plot or your narrative arc, if it's, you know, a season or however you're defining that, your campaign style, you know, how often you go back and reassess where things are and make adjustments to whatever's going on with the players, or do you just let it organically grow from what you started with and you don't go back and reassess it as the characters just kind of create their own threads and timeline and lines around it?
I'll answer really briefly if that's okay. I feel like it's a constant micro adjustments, honestly. Like when I'm prepping for each session, I'm like needing to look at like where we are, where we're going any which way. So I haven't really felt the need, unless again something major comes up, to kind of look and say like, oh, I have to course correct entirely. Just like, oh, okay, this is a shift. And after the campaign, it's nice to look back and be like, oh, we made a total U-turn. But in the moment, it's just constant course correction.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if it's a really, really long I might look back and like, did I leave a major plot point on the wayside that I might want to grab and drag back into the story? Otherwise, it's just the micro adjustments of what needs to happen between sessions and, in the session itself.
Yeah.
If there's nothing else, I'll go no. Okay, go on.
I mean, you already know how I am. Like, everything's nebulous until it's not.
Yeah.
So, one of my favorite campaigns I ran, I took a very character-centric view of it. So the player characters were the stars of the world. Like, they were nobodies, but they were also like the whole entire campaign revolved around them and their backstories. So what I did was I basically had a very rough idea of the story I wanted to tell with each character. But the order of those stories that they were told, I didn't have set. Everything just got more difficult as it got pushed further along. So, like, what might have been a level 2 adventure, if it was the first thing they went on, turned into like a level 8 adventure, because it's like, one of the last things they end up doing. And so it's very much like what Syrup is saying. It's a constant process where I look at everything as kind of a campaign arc, very, very loose. So that was like the connected stories between the different players. And then I look at everything as like a story arc for what is the next big goal they're trying to accomplish, kind of like a milestone level up system kind of thing.
I call that a narrative arc.
And then narrative arc. Yeah, that'd be a good term for it. And then like the session arc of what are the things that are going to happen immediately throughout the session. And kind of like what I was saying earlier, the more pressing something is, the more solidified it is. But everything else can change. Like, I had one adventure where the whole goal was that the characters were going to go, and it was a Furbolg, and their village had some kind of weird curse placed upon it, where like the forest was getting sick and the animals were getting sick and all this stuff, and they had to cure it. And so for me, the story was going to be, they have to go to the different fairy courts, and each fairy court was a different season. So there was like spring, summer, winter, fall, and then collect a token and then bring it back, and then they combine those things and that they, cure the sickness. What they ended up deciding to do was lie to each fairy court individually and then begin a war between all of the seasons. So from that point, like, everything I had to kind of throw out and come up with, how am I going to integrate this new plot? Again, like, I very much hate wasting effort on trying to write things or do things. So I try to only plan like the story arc and then the immediate session, and then leave everything else open to what the players decide they want to go. And then when I can see kind of where they're going with it, I then continue writing on from that point. So it's a constant adjustment process.
Nice. We got a question from Waffles where Okay. So, it's potentially a simple yes or no question. I don't think anyone will absolutely answer it yes or no. But have you ever, as a GM, run a campaign to the successful conclusion you imagined at the conception of its idea? Like,
Yes.
Nope, not once. Not. Well, I don't think I've ever planned something with a preconceived notion of the end. I only planned as far as the final obstacle.
then your answer
So
is
I don't-
yes. They got somewhere at the end.
So I'm always surprised at what the players come up with and how the end reaches.
Right.
So no.
No.
Nope. But that is because I am jamming my first campaign. So
Do you feel it's on track to end that way?
It's a pre-written adventure path. So I want to say yes, but the amount of times we've already talked about going completely off the rails, I'm leaning toward maybe no.
I think I can actually say yes, but then again, this is because I've run a few Power Ranger inspired games where the end goal is somewhat obvious. And I had one, play out pretty close to how I seen it in my head. Obviously, there were some player things that happened, but I had a very specific idea of like in the final couple of episodes, this thing is going to happen, and we were on track, and it happened. But I can say yes because I've run a couple Power Ranger inspired games, so the end goal, as imagined, is in some way the defeat of the villain. One of those did go off the rails, where there was a big bad evil guy switch out at the end because of some love plot lines that happened with the big bad evil guy, and so I just swapped him out for
The
their
big bad
father.
evil love interest.
Yes, exactly. It happened. It was really good. We went with it, so I just swapped them out for in this case, their father. And
Yeah.
That's really
That's awesome.
interesting. Like turning a BBG into something you did not expect at all.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I have
wanna see it.
a number of times as a player and with certain parties defeated whole like arc level bosses with kindness, of like befriending them or like talking them down, or there's one where I gave them a hug.
I think that I've run campaigns that have ended the way that along the lines of what I thought, but only very short campaigns, nothing long.
Mm-hmm.
I think the more time there is in it, the less likely it is to end where you thought it would end. And I also think there's certain player styles that are more likely to just dismantle everything that you're thinking of doing, which I'm okay with that too.
I would say my experience, to answer Waffle's question, it was yes. But I'd say from my own experience from running I ran a 3-year campaign, and it actually landed exactly where I kind of thought it would.
That's really impressive.
Yeah,
wow.
This is kind of the campaign I referenced a little bit before of Supernatural plus Evangelion.
Ooh.
Which is, hey, I really want to run a campaign that is supernatural, Men in Black. Everybody works for a secret organization that works for a corporate government that fights monsters. After 3 seasons, the characters ended up going to exactly where I wanted them to go, or not wanted. The idea I had for the end, over the course of 3 years, they naturally bent towards that goal. Now, I'm not saying I had any control over where the slinky went in the middle. It definitely went down the stairs across the neighborhood into some other person's house, came back into mine, fed my dog, and wandered off. But in the end, it did get to the bottom of those stairs, and I was very impressed, and I think we all had fun.
I think that's an underrated flex, Jeph, for your jamming skills. I think that's pretty darn impressive.
Yeah.
When you're planning out your game, actually even before that, do you change? I'm going to ask it differently. When you start your campaign, do you start from your characters or from your campaign concept? Like, do you get players and say, what do you want to play, and you build things, or do you build things and then look for players to fit it?
Both.
Yeah. So, and neither. No. So yeah. So like I was saying previously, it usually starts with me for like a concept of what I want to run. So like I say, oh, I really want to do something Western themed. I want to do a Western themed campaign with like cowboys and elves and whatever else. And then I pitch that to my players. Hey, would this be something you're interested in? And then if they're all on board, then I say, great, come up with your character concept for how you would want to see your character in a world like this. And then once they've all done that, and then they've written out kind of like their concept for what they would want to do, I take all that together. I think about how we could fit it all in, like connect all the tissues of all the different players, and then begin writing the campaign based off of those backstories. So that I feel like that's the really good freedom you have when you do a homebrew campaign, is that you have that flexibility to really make it character driven, as opposed to what we were talking about earlier with pre-written adventures, where characters kind of have to, like, maybe they want to run like, Curse of Strahd, which is an excellent campaign, but there's a mentality going in of like they need to create their characters in a certain way in order to fit into that world.
Yeah.
I think it just genuinely depends. It's very situational for me.
Yeah, and it's situational for me as well. Especially since I like to run some obscure indie games a lot, So some of them, the entire point of the game too is you're going, hey, I want to play this specific game. This is what the game is about. Now let's sit down and actually talk about what we're doing, because that is, Misspent Youth is all about that. You know what the theme of the game is, and then now you're sitting down, where are we, who are we, and you're creating all of that together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How much does the system affect your arcs and your plots and stuff?
Not at all. I because I've.
I'm going to challenge you on that in a moment, but go on.
Well. So I mean, I'm sure the more systems I learn, the more it would affect it. Yes. But the idea of wanting to run something always, because it always comes from the internalized idea first. The system is the system the players are comfortable playing, and I make my story fit whatever the system is that the players want to play. But that's my answer.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that Sophia is gonna answer for me here, but if you're asking that in regards to Pathfinder versus D&D, as a completely different question than a lot of those far more indie TTRPGs. Sophia, if you don't mind kind of giving some examples or something like that, because I can't think of exactly any at the moment. But
absolutely, yeah. I mean, a lot of them influence from the beginning. I just pitched a game by a friend of mine called Exceptionals. It's an X-Men inspired game. The point of the game is it is about, you are powered individuals. You can be superheroes, but you're not necessarily superheroes, right? It's about sort of marginalized people in the spaces they create for themselves, and how they find safety and all of those things. Yeah. So the game influences where things are going from the beginning, from the character creation to, because there's two in the game. You pick two. They're not playbooks, but they're similar to playbooks, right? You pick two different ones. One is your power set, sort of, and then one is who you are in the community. Are you a photojournalist, something like that? and then it goes from there. Then you create, what is your space? Where is your space that you hang out, that you bring people to be safe, whatever it is, and then you build off of that. I'm trying.
I immediately thought of 10 Candles, by the way.
Yeah,
definitely.
It's a game about despair. It is a game about lack of hope. You're not playing a comedy, 10 Candles.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Sophia.
Unincorporated is a GM-less game where it is a game of small town drama, right? So you're making a small town and your characters, and you move within the small town, and there is, drama. It is 100% based on drama. To the 10 Candles, there's also Quietus, which is a game of melancholy horror. That is, from the beginning, you are starting, this is a horror game. Things are going to happen. Your characters are going to be threatened. And that has some very cool hope and despair mechanics and stuff. So your character can either escape or get away. But during that time, they're going to have to deal with difficult things. They're going, there are a lot, but those are some of my favorite examples.
Yeah, I even, sometimes for me, the system, by me choosing the system, I'm dictating to myself what I'm going to do. Like, for instance, I have a game idea for something that I want to run, and I've been kind of reading a lot of Neil Gaiman books, and they've been like just eating at my brain. So I want to do something like Sandman, where everybody is a god of something in some way, and the rest of the world is just the narrative elements around their story. And it made me start searching for a system. I think I've found the one that I think I'll work with.
Interesting.
Because I don't think it would have worked with the standard systems. I don't think D&D or Pathfinder would have fit it. I'm sort of examining Invisible Sun as the one to kind of play into it, because it has such an odd surrealism to I don't want to call modern, but pseudo-modern world with godlike affinities. And that was one where in my head, I kept writing it down and playing with the idea. And I was like, I don't have a system in my head that works for this. So I got to go find the system. So sometimes that, it is dictated by that. And, I think that's a good thing for all the indie creators out there, because that is where they fit best. I think indie creators, for the most part, are often a terrible fit for fantasy, because the haul to get people to pay attention is so difficult. The hill is so high. Not because D&D or Pathfinder are the best things in the world, just because markets say these are the biggest ones. It's going to be hard to draw players from it. But 10 Candles and Tales from the Loop and Alien and Blade Runner, they create niche. They hit niches that people want to run that don't have the competition of the 500-pound gorilla. So I think that's one of the beauties of them.
I actually, sorry.
That's it.
I completely agree with that. So my answer before was no, and it still is no. But I want to add a caveat, and that is, the first time I ever DM'd, I DM'd a game of Dread, which is a storytelling RPG that uses a block of Jenga tiles.
Yeah.
And it encompasses a lot more group activity. Like one pull isn't necessarily one person making a choice; it is the group as a whole. And it encompasses a lot more of the narrative theater of the mind between actions. And when I DM'd that, the way I went about creating how I would interact with my players, how I would narrate for them, the storytelling elements I would give them, the things I wanted them to feel that I wanted to make sure we shared. Those were the things that I focused on, and those are also the things I focus on every time I DM anything else. So the system affects how we alter the results or how the outcomes are decided. But that initial sensation I had with Dread is what goes into everything I plan for whenever I go to DM. even though it's normally dice, and normally because it's the most widely recognized, it's D&D. But if you ask most people that play D&D, I DM wrong. So that's also fair.
I want to just make a slight comment on something that you said, Zeal. So I completely agree that there's a really, really beautifully wide variety of like indie TTRPGs out there that answer some really niche, really cool concepts. But you mentioned that they're less of a fit for like the classic fantasy. And I actually very much disagree with that, because I think there's still a space even for that. Because D&D and Pathfinder and, let's say, Starfinder and, Star Wars and things like that, like, that's not the only thing. Is it the figurehead by far, D&D? Yes, absolutely. It's mainstream, but take Quest, for example. I think that's a beautiful classic fantasy way. It's just handled differently, and it answers. It just finds an answer for different people's, preferences. And I'll also just quickly plug All the Witches on Kickstarter right now, which has blown past its goal. I
it looks awesome.
Love that, and I'm so excited for that. But that's also witches in the classic fantasy, but done in a really beautifully unique way.
Well, I mean, that's what you want out of a system. You want it to do some of the heavy lifting for you, so you don't have to do everything. If you don't want to be the designer of the system, you want to find a system that helps you, carry some of the weight. As a DM, I think you want to carry a backpack. You don't want to be pulling a cart. So, find a system that is your cart and let it do a lot of the heavy lifting if you can. I'm going to get one big question in, and this one I think is important because I think safety tools are important in DMing. When you bring your players in, how much effect and how do you alter your character and campaign arcs based on their answers to your system, to your safety tools, if you're using safety tools? I know sometimes with people you've been playing with for 10 years, you're not using safety tools, but particularly for streamers and things like that, I think it's pretty unsafe not to. It's not a good thing to avoid it. You should do it, but how much do their answers affect your character and campaign arc planning? Like if they're afraid of spiders, like how does that change your thing if you were planning on having your big bad as the drow or something?
Gotcha. It changes it entirely. I'm not playing a game that my players are not comfortable with. If there's red lines, then it's not going to be there. If there's orange lines, there's going to be immense communication, but I'll still probably avoid it for safety and ease of everybody. And I will be using safety tools for people that I played with for years and years because life changes and there's just always going to be. I just always want that communication. Always. It can't hurt.
Yeah, totally.
Me too. Well, that was an easy one. Oh my god.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I guess it's for me. It still goes back to that. When I'm pitching. What would bringing an idea to a group of people I would like to play with. I'm generally working from the kernel of an idea or concept that I'm building around, and that is extremely fluid. Like it doesn't have a concrete has to be this way, but like it might be like, hey, this thing that I want to happen, we're going to be telling horror. This is going to be creepy and spooky, and you're going to be scared. Let me know what you don't want to be scared by, please. Let's not so it's yes.
Yeah. I mean, I have another question. That one actually was kind of an easy one, I guess. So, if you've co-DM'd, how did you handle clashing plot lines? Because they are going to intertwine. They're going to be different from each. You have different perspectives as DMs or GMs. How have you handled that?
Well, I've never co-DM'd, but I feel like the players themselves kind of become that co-DM
Yeah.
because you have one direction that you want to go, and they have a direction that they want to go, and you kind of have to figure out how you can make both work. It's like trying to herd cats or trying to steer a runaway cart, but you also want to give them the freedom that they feel like they have that agency to impact the world and the story. You don't want to shoehorn or railroad them into anything in particular.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't say that I've done that. I imagine because like in my experience, the chaos that causes the player outside of purposely causing chaos that causes the party to like not follow the plan they just said they were going to follow is that everyone's individual interpretation of the plan in their own head has like this thing that they can picture, and then even though everyone else is following what they think is the plan, they picture it differently, so everyone just scatters into different directions. And I think what 2DMs builds that for the DM spot, which would be extremely entertaining, but I do not have an actual answer for what I would do or how it would work.
Does anyone here have experience co-DMing a game like that?
I've co-DM'd once, and
Yeah, what was that like?
it was very complicated. I
did
did it
you
when I was
split
just starting and I was
stuff?
new, and I asked the person that I respected as a DM and said, would you be interested in co-DMing with me? I'd like to kind of just have somebody there who has enough experience to kind of help me out early in the campaign, make sure that I understand what I'm doing better than I think I do, or give me some guidance when things go to shit, which is what happens anyway. And because it was sort of a mentor-mentee relationship, I was more inclined to adjust to their suggestions than just run with my thought. And it really gave me a perspective where when it happened, I would have we would have the meetings at Denny's after. So I'd sit and I'd ask him, like, why did you suggest doing this? And for the most part, there were always good answers, and it was mostly guiding me to make sure that I didn't end up in, locked into a corner or taking away the agency of the players in some way that wasn't fair to the players. Because as a new DM, sometimes you can do that inadvertently. Mm-hmm. And, we didn't have clashing arcs because it was my story with him giving me guidance. So I would say.
Interesting.
I would say that I don't know if this counts as a full co-DM, but I found co-DMing or that concept to be very helpful for preventing burnout.
Yeah.
I remember getting a little bit, maybe not stressed, but kind of like overloaded with like, oh man, I have so many plot threads going on, I have a lot of stuff. This is a little tough to kind of keep track. I need a moment to think about it. And I had a few players that were really enjoying the game. And since we're playing kind of at this time a West Marches style world, I had 20 players in my game. A few of those players were like, can I DM a session? Like, I have a fun story idea. Do you mind if I take over for a bit? And so I had 3 or 4 players just run different one-off missions in the world, keeping to the themes. Well, that gave me time to kind of step back and see how my players are playing with different DMs, but also breathe a bit, right? Think about the world, think about your story, be like, is this where I wanted to go? Am I doing this right for myself? So I have a lot of fun with that. I love the idea of co-DMing, just because I also think that different viewpoints make the world feel more full. Yeah. And it really sells kind of cool ideas, right? Like if you have I've always wanted to run a game where like different cities are run by different DMs, so then that way the players themselves can feel like they're actually going to a different city, right?
Right. So can we answer one more question that came in chat in the last minute?
Goodness.
And I think it's a nice
We're
one
about to find
end on.
out.
I love Jordan's question, so yes, please.
It's a nice question. Gives you kind of like, it's a good one. So question everyone: what often inspires you when creating your stories, NPCs, and more? And are there certain themes you gravitate towards?
Oh yeah. My favorite, I guess, story trope is the average person's thrust into extraordinary circumstances. I'm a big fan of the lost with a bathrobe going through the forest type of thing. But just so generally, if the players aren't building characters that match that, the world they're in will. um, um, I also have learned that comedy and horror follow very, very similar beats. And so I'll generally use either humor to diffuse a scary topic or use a horror backdrop to tell a silly story. But those are generally my cabin in the woods style. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know like if there's a particular individual theme that I gravitate toward, but in terms of what inspires me, like I live my life by being very observant. Like I just found this as a pattern that like, and then when I applied it to jamming, I was like, oh yay, great. And by observant, I mean like I patternized a lot of tropes in TV and like characters and things like that, and I'm like, you are this type of person, you are that type of person, and not, there are their own issues when it comes to not putting people in boxes, but I categorize a little bit almost instinctually when that's just kind of how I go through life. I was a very avid reader of fantasy as a kid, and that probably had something to do with it, and so when I think of like, what story do I want to tell? What kind of NPC is this? I usually like to pull from one of those boxes that I have yet to pull from, and so I get a nice array of types of people and types of personalities and things like that. And so in regards to the certain themes that I gravitate towards, in our show Outcast and Outclassed on WMS, it is kind of funny, and I will repeat ahead of time that we are very, very intense users of safety tools, but we joke that we just deal with emotional trauma all of the time. So if there is a theme, it would probably be that we made a shirt of all of our characters like independent emotional like issues, and a lovely Venn diagram. And the reason though that I gravitate towards that is because I love nothing more than watching the players magically like think of their characters and be like, oh, how would they react to this situation that's personally really difficult for them? How do they put themselves into their own messes and get themselves and to overcome it? Is like super, super satisfying. So I joke about the emotional trauma, but really it is just to watch them come through the other side and go through those journeys, because it's like the most satisfying to watch, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Nice.
So once I have my premise of what I want to do, I find lots of pieces of media that take place in that similar setting or whatever else. So like I decide, for example, that I wanted to do a one shot that took place like in the South during the Great Depression. So I watched like Of Mice of Men and Grapes of Wrath and Oh Brother Where Art Thou, and I do historical research or look up photos or kind of create like a bit of a mood board. Like these are the visual or thematic elements I want to capture.
Yeah.
And I kind of find the threads that connect all of those. What is the running theme of all those things? And usually that is the same kind of theme that made me want to run that adventure to begin with. Because I tried to always make every adventure different. I try not to have things that are too similar. So once I have the premise, once I know the setting and all that, I think, what is it that really drew me to this? And watching all these different pieces of media, like what are the threads that connect them? And how can I be sure to take those threads and implement them into my game so that it feels how I want it to feel and captures the emotions I want it to?
Yeah, mood is one of the powers of the GM that character or player agency doesn't necessarily dismantle.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the beautiful things we get to do.
Yeah, I guess I'd say an inspiration, like a lot of us, and I think Serb said as well. I love reading a lot of fantasy books. I love reading a lot of sci-fi books. But I feel like I get inspiration for a lot of my stories through just random music. I love putting on a favorite album and then letting whatever algorithm on Spotify or Pandora, whatever, just take me to a weird place, right?
I love that.
Yeah.
So, like, I found some weird Japanese band. I have no idea what they're saying, but I vibe with the music really well. So I'm like, I feel myself writing sessions that I'm with this soundtrack in my brain. That being said, I still have the I can definitely see on myself now looking back through my GM years of, oh yeah, I think pretty much the constant theme in every campaign is always fight consolidated power. That's always a background thing, but when it comes to first session or plot arc, just a huge fan of listening to music to just kind of hang out and see what does that make your brain do.
Yeah, that's cool.
I love
That's a
that.
really good one.
I have the shared stories, and bringing up Dread reminded me. But I in the game the game that I've a number of times DM'd through Dread, that I really love, had the reason I wanted to DM it was a specific moment in the structure of the plot that was hidden from the characters that you only knew as the GM, and was like I hope I can hold a straight face before we get to a moment. And it was a game in which the tower, initially when you play Dread, the tower represents basically catastrophe. Like, if the tower falls, something really bad's happening. More than likely, a character has died. So the players go into this game believing that the tower is their health bar. And really, in this game, the tower is stuck to a time loop that every time it falls, they have to reset the game and start moving. But you don't tell them that is an element in the game until the first time the time loop hits. And then you don't even tell them. You just close the shoulder with them, make it happen, and just pretend like nothing was wrong. And the moment is super silly and crazy and dramatic in a way that, like, they're going through this level. There's chaos happening. They're trying to escape a dungeon, and an evil creepy witch shows up and like curses them, and they're freaking out, and they're not paying attention to you as you stand up and physically knock the tower down. And they start screaming, "Oh my god, what'd you do? Oh, I don't understand." And then you just sit back down and restart the entrance of the entire game verbatim, word for word from the script. And they're trying to ask questions, and they're trying to figure out, I don't understand. That moment, from the moment I heard of it, was that I knew the things the type of thing I wanted to focus on as a DM. Like, finding that emotion, that beat, that like kernel of spot that's gonna like suck people in and blow them out the other end was really got me into DMing. Not that was the question, but that was what it reminded me of.
Yeah, I'm inspired. I read a lot. I watch TV, whatever. I'm inspired by a lot of that all the time. You can sometimes see the lines of what I'm watching or reading in a session, for that week. Some things lined up with what was happening in a show or something. Themes I gravitate towards. I mean, I think it varies on system and game, because not every game is necessarily meant for the systems, but I'm a big fan of some of the bigger, themes of, like anti-capitalism stuff, and I gravitate towards a lot of that, and sort of themes of representation, specifically as a trans person. I have a lot of these, Millennium Knights, my Power Rangers inspired games. There are a lot of trans NPCs in them because that's something I want to see. Some of my first players in the first Millennium Knights games were trans and playing trans characters, so then I gave them a young NPC that sees them transforming into a Power Ranger, and they, there's this, older trans person that I know is trans, and they're a Power Ranger. The kind of things that, if I was younger, I would definitely want to have wanted to see. And,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's lovely.
Yeah, I mean, like all of us, I think this whole industry is filled with people that read and see, art and great TV and movies. Although we also watch a lot of bad movies and bad TV, but get inspired by them in weird ways too. But
Yeah.
I love surrealism in games. I love dream sequences and weird visions that have no meaning until the character gives it meaning and turns it into action. Weird things like that can happen in my games. I love themes around finding yourself. I like characters with interesting backstories, and I will play with those backstories in ways that give them opportunities to grow from what they told me about themselves. And I think that's a lot of fun when I get a chance to do that. I don't know. I like the things that I dislike the most are big, long, slogging combats. Actually, that's the only one. That's the one thing that I don't love much. If I have to use a battle map because I have 70 enemies, that this is painful for me, and I'm only doing it because it really is necessary to do. But I will do it because it's important to the game or to what they need to do or whatever they've chosen to do. Even
I think brings back to what John had asked, brought up about the difference between a stream for an audience versus around the table. And I think the biggest difference is how you define high action. Because if you're around the table, you're thinking high action is my character's doing the damage in the fight in this thing. But from an audience's perspective, that's the slowest part of the plot and delivery. And high action for an audience is the rate of delivery of dialogue from people playing.
Yeah.
Because anytime nothing's being said, it's dead air. And the further there's dead air, the less is being communicated to the audience. So the long, sprawling battles are the hardest thing to get emotional buy-in to, not for the people around the table, for an audience member that's not rolling the dice themselves.
Yep.
Yeah, I could say, having started a podcast here in October, I'm still fairly new at it, but that was one thing I 100% panicked on was please, sweet Jesus God, don't let combats take too long. To the point where I was like, cool, hey, here's how it goes, players, for the most part. I'm going to edit out every turn you don't do something useful. And we're just going to clear this up. I don't see... It was not adding to it, and also, I'm going to treat these NPCs very much like real people. If you run up and disarm two of them and knock out the third, the other one's going to run. This combat will generally end in 3 rounds, unless it has a reason to go longer.
Yeah.
I agree very much with Scott about giant combats are a mess and terrible. Unless the player really wants it, which I did have a player one time pull the superhero paladin moment of, I'm going to stop this planar breach. I said, well, there's 100 ki already coming through. He said, well, I'm going to use my 3.5 night ability to challenge every bad guy within 100 feet. And they have to fight me. And I was like, all right, you know what? Fine, let's do this. And we played it out, and the player had a blast. Me as a DM was like, oh, jeepers, I'm never doing that again. But the player loved it, and that was 100% worth it to me to walk away from that person having a story that they still tell and love, where they defeated every bad guy, almost dying.
Wow.
And I'm like, cool. I'm glad they've taken it and they love it. I will never do that again.
Well, I think that's a good place for us to end the session on. Avoid big giant combats if you can, unless they're really narratively important.
Unless the system is meant for it, I will also add.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, if the system makes it fast and feel organic and fun, have at it.
Ooh,
some do that better than others.
13th Age is great for that, if you guys haven't used that before.
Haven't played it. Pelgrane Press. Yep. They do make good stuff. Gumshoe, I want to try. That's their mystery game.
Ooh,
Like
fun.
40s style mystery game, the Maltese Falcon kind of thing. So, all right, I'm going to let everybody go around and go over who they are and what they're doing, where they can find you, cool stuff you're doing. Let's go backwards from where we started. So we're going to start with Julian and work our way around.
Snap. Okay, I was not prepared. I'm so ready. Hi, I am Julian, the everyday superhero. I am, during the day, a wellness communicator and coach for all the wonderful nerdy folk that I feel a part of the community with. I am the creator and lead GM of Mission Quest, an exercise-infused TTRPG that combines the levity and fun of playing a digitally run tabletop game and a group exercise class that you can play from home. I forgot what I was going to say for the rest. Oh, I am the host of Everyday Superhero Cast, which is a nerdy wellness chat show that discusses inspiration loosely. It's mostly just me talking to people that I'm inspired by about whatever they're inspired about. Because I believe inspiration is contagious. And every so often I go, hey, here's the thing you didn't know about health. And then no one listens to that part because it's not as fun. Next weekend, I'm really excited. This is not specifically my event, but I really want to plug it. I'm helping with coordinating the Days of Tales 2 event through the Tales from the Table Studios. It is a 3-day weekend-long fundraiser for NAMI.org, using and utilizing, bringing together the TTRPG community and performing community specifically. It is from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 12 p.m. to 12 a.m. Each day. There are a number of storytelling one-shots, and in between there are panels, one of which I'll be hosting that is on creative burnout. It's basically a streamed con to raise awareness and funds for NAMI.org, the National Mental Health. Anyway, I'm really excited about it. I'm not in any of the games, but if you can follow the Lion Knight 42 on Twitter or follow Tales from the Table Studios on Twitch, because that is where they're hosting the event.
If you drop the link in the chat for me, I'll drop it in at the end of the show.
I will try and successfully find it in that amount of time.
Okay, Sophia.
Hi, I'm Sophia, also known as Nerdy Teddy. You can find me on Twitter at Nerdy Teddy. You can usually find me over with Nerds with Dice, where I'm a cabinet member. We are currently looking for GMs and pitches for everything from interviews to panels. Focus on indie games, so if you're a designer, a game writer, we also accept pitches if you want to talk about your game and stuff. So if you want to run an indie game, come check that out. You can find the application pinned on the Nerds with Dice Twitter. And March 27th, I will be running a one-shot on Girls Run These Worlds of Camp Flying Moose for girls of all kinds. What was it? Oh, the pudding cups are going to go missing, and they're going to go find and, have a big adventure while trying to discover what took their dessert. So, hope to see you there.
All right, John.
Hi, I'm John, over with Double Crit Fail. I run actual plays on Twitch. I create fun animated videos on YouTube. Occasionally I make memes about things going on in the TTRPG industry. This Thursday, I'm running a Pathfinder 2e beginner box game. We're all brand new players to the system, and I'm also a brand new GM to that system. So if you're interested in transitioning and you want to see us bumble through it and learn from our mistakes, come check us out. You can find me over on YouTube at Double Crit Fail, Twitter at Double Crit Fail, and Twitch at Double Crit Fail. So Double Crit Fail at all the things.
Yes. Jeph.
Hey, I'm Jeph, GM of Big Campaign Podcast. You can find me on Twitter as well as YouTube at Big Campaign Pod. You can find me on Reddit at Savage Jeph. I'm always a big fan of helping bounce ideas off. I love any kind of things I can do to talk with fellow GMs and nerds. So if you find me online anywhere, feel free to bug me and talk to me. I like supporting the community and like being part of it. So
Cool. All right, Syrup.
Hi, y'all. I am Syrup. I'm one half of Waffles Maple Syrup. I GM Pathfinder 2E over on our channel, Waffles Maple Syrup. It is called Outcasts and Outclassed. We are gearing up for an amazing season 2. We are in the interim running one-on-one sessions with each of the cast and myself as the GM. They are wonderful, and if you are not yet caught up with O&O, I highly encourage you can watch those and get a taste for the amazing cast and the amazing roleplay. We do our best to give a taste of the system, give a taste of the rules, give a taste of the combat, and balance it all and make it as entertaining as we can. It is great, if I may say so myself. And then you can just search Waffles Maple Syrup, one word. Most places you will find us on the internet, or just go to our website. I will only ask that if you have a free moment, go to our YouTube and hit that subscribe. We're trying to grow it because we're so close to getting monetized on there, and it would be lovely if you help us out with that. And then I'll just tease that keep your eyes peeled in the coming months, because there's going to be a lot of stuff happening and I can't speak about all of them, so just keep your eyes peeled.
Wonderful.
That's exciting.
I'm Scott. I am one half of ZealZaddy. People don't know that, but there's two of us actually. My pronouns are he, him.
Co-DM.
No, not my co-DM now. We create game products on DriveThruRPG, both D&D and soon Cypher. We are also, within that, Cypher allows you to really build your own games, settings and games, which I really like that. That way we can build some of our own. We have a Patreon that is on hold while we're doing this transition to the Cypher stuff, so I don't want to be charging people while we're preparing what's coming next. So there's a lot of things bubbling behind the scenes that are getting ready to come. This is Story Talk, where all the pictures tell a story, and I think the stories were all awesome tonight. I want to thank all of you for coming on, and we will see you in 2 weeks, because I'm taking a week off next week. Have some stuff. My daughter's going to a competition, so going to be out of town for a week and go have fun with the family, and be back in 2 weeks with some amazing guests that I don't remember the title of the episode, but I want to tell it. It is How Can Writers and Artists Make a Living in TTRPG? And if you are a writer, an artist, a designer, or anything, you may need to sit in and watch this one because it is hard to make a living in this industry. But there are some people who have done it. Some people are working towards it. And I hope that lots more people find a way to make a living here, because it is a really cool industry. Being in a niche industry makes it tough, but it's exciting, and maybe you will be able to grow now, and we'll be able to have more people who can stay in the industry for their day job too. All right. We will see you in 2 weeks. Have a good night, everybody. Bye.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Had a blast. Thanks.